and welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. This episode, we will continue our discussion on Everything Begins and Ends at the Kentucky Club by Ben Sáenz. My name is Vanessa, and this is Literally Literary, which is brought to you by the Mellon Foundation through the Humanities Collaborative at EPCC and UTEP. This episode, we will also be joined by Ben Sáenz himself.
So really happy and honored to have the great Benjamin Alire Sáenz here with us to talk about the book itself. And we all chose this book for different reasons. And we had talked about it earlier. We got, we have some questions for you, Ben, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
And I guess we could start off by asking you what your favorite story is. We have our favorites, but from the collection, which one is your favorite? And why?
Well, there are two. One of them is The Rulemaker.
Mine too. Mine too.
And the other one is, it's a heartbreaking story. Chasing the Dragon.
Yep.
That one's my favorite.
Yeah, those are the two.
Yeah.
And I think both of them is because I have really, in the past, had a real serious problem with drugs. And those stories helped heal me, actually. And so it's really funny I had a student who read the book, and he was real, you could tell this guy was real, he liked to smoke pot. You could tell. He's just one of these alternative guys. And so he'd read the book, and he ran after me after class. He says, "Mr. Sáenz, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." "Where did you do your research?" And I said, "Dude, the same place you do yours."
Yeah, Rulemaker is my favorite, and I know Chasing the Dragon is y'all's favorite, and but both great stories that have interesting ways of looking at addiction and trauma. And with me, Rulemaker, I really like how you manage to humanize, a drug connect, and then I really related to that kind of father. I had that kind of father figure myself, like tough love, and. I don't know what you guys liked in particular about Chasing the Dragon, since we didn't talk about it.
Dang, I don't know. There's so many things, just the entire story.
I mean, just, the humanity of it, being able to fall.
Well, the interesting story about The Rulemaker, when I was writing that story, I thought, what would it be like? Because I've known lots of people whose parents were all into that, all about that growing up. I remember when I was went to a place, for my addiction, a residential treatment center, and I was leaving. And when you guys come in and you always ask them, "So, what's your drug of choice?" And he said, and so I was so he was sitting, and he said, "Heroin." I said, "Oh," and I said, "How old are you?" He said, "I'm 19." And I said, "How'd that happen?" And he said, "My father, when I was 10, gave me some. And when I was 15, he sold it to me." And I wanted to cry, and I went look at him. I said, "I hope you know you deserved a better father." And but I also think, now that man was just evil, I think. But a lot of people who raise kids, maybe they shouldn't be raising kids, but they're in this world and they're messed up, and it doesn't make them not good. It's just addiction has taken over them. And I wanted to write about a father. No matter what you thought of his morality, he was going to raise a son that wasn't going to be in that world. And so I got a review that this book is full of bad fathers, and I think that they thought of him as a bad father, but I considered him to be a very good father in the end, because the end of the story says, "Who was he? Who was your father anyway? He was the man that saved my life." And that's true. And do people not look at the context of that? what's a good father? Well, he did the best he could, and really, he willed himself to save his son. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like the beauty of the story, that in the end, it is a tragedy for the father, but not for the son.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Max gave him something too, at the end he released him from his pain and suffering, when he was on the respirator.
So, yeah. So I think all those stories, they have something of the border of the border I used to know. Yeah. Like Chasing the Dragon begins with a picture taken in Juarez. Yeah. Because that's what we used to do in our day. We used to go to Juarez, they take a picture of you sitting at. I don't have any of mine anymore, but I do have one of the Club Hawaiian that used to be there. And there's me and my sister and another friend, Linda, and Hector and Annette, and friends I still have. And we're sitting there with our Kona coconut and pineapple drinks at the Hawaiian. And that's how it used to be. You go to Juarez, you take a picture. And so I put that in the story because that's a real border thing. Or it was in the past. Yeah. And so in every story, there's something that's particularly border. The Kentucky Club was as well. And I like the Kentucky Club because it's really intertwined with American history and American society, because they named it the Kentucky Club because Kentucky bourbon couldn't be made over there anymore, so they made it in Juarez, and they passed it through the Kentucky Club, and that's why it's called the Kentucky Club. Yeah. So since Prohibition, and so that's kind of cool, and also because the whole strip during Prohibition was quite a scene. Texas might have been dry, but we people in El Paso didn't give a damn. They just went to Juarez. They got dressed up. They went to dinner. They'd go to a nightclub. And they were nice. It was nice. Yeah. I knew a woman. Her name was Nina Bayham. May she rest in peace. She was a Jewish singer from New York City. She came to Juarez to be a chanteuse, a singer in one of the clubs. And she did that for many years until the scene was over, and she stayed in El Paso. I met her when she was an older woman. She was a member of the Jewish community here, and she was so leftist in her politics. She was really wild and sweet. But when she died, there was a picture of her at her service, and it was her as a singer in Juarez when they took a picture of her. And she had a backless dress. And she was young and she was beautiful. And she was turning around like that with her backless dress. And it said, Nina Bayham singing tonight at, I don't know what club it was. I thought, wow, what a scene it must have been. Yeah. And so that was a part of what happened at the border. It wasn't all, it shifts in history. But Kentucky Club is part of all of that. The Kentucky Club was a place where you could go get your tickets to the fights, tickets to the bullfights, the boxing matches. You could go get them there. They always say that it's rumored that the Margarita was invented there. Now, there's another club in Tijuana that falsely claims that. So, but I like that story, and I like the story of when Elizabeth Taylor. I don't know if this is true or not, but I like the story. That when she got a quickie divorce in Juarez from Bobby Fischer, went to the Kentucky Club, walked in and bought everybody a drink. I love that story. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a cool story. But it's like it's legendary. It's legendary, and many generations have gone there, different times. That wasn't our favorite, club of choice when I used to go to Juarez. As a young man, but it is the first drink I ever took there. I wasn't of age, but I sat at a bar and ordered a drink and felt like a man. Yep.
I mean, and the whole collection, I think you do a really good job of interrogating what masculinity is. We were talking about that the last episode, and that of course it's a social construct. That there's no they wear skirts in Scotland, right? And they just call them kilts. And that you don't. There's no one way to be a man, right?
Well, yeah, and in Tanzania, men hold hands as they walk. The women walk behind, but they hold hands. It's really interesting. But the when I don't think I do it deliberately, that I bring in the theme of masculinity and what it means to be a man. But I think I do just out of, it just happens naturally in me because I'm gay. And so therefore, one of the great things I think about being gay is that it gives you, because you know you're different. You're never going to be a man like straight men are going to be men. That's not going to happen. So you can either reproduce that same masculinity as a gay man, or you can say, I have an opportunity, because I'm gay, to reflect upon this. What kind of man do I want to be? And for me, it was very much about attempting to be kind. I'm not always successful, and it's not easy to be kind. It's not easy to be forgiving and generous all of the time, because sometimes you are confronted by people who are extremely violent, and it doesn't seem that I'm disciplined enough to do that. But that's the goal, and I think part of that goal also has to do with my mother. I don't think my father taught me how to be a man. My mother did. Mm-hmm. And I'm eternally grateful. I'm eternally grateful for both of my parents, really. But my father was a man in that traditional kind of, hasta aquí se para el tren y yo soy el que corta el queso. Okay, he was that guy. And, but he had his own virtues. I don't think he never was going to be Father of the Year, but he was a good man. He was a good man in the world. He did good things. And, my father was very proud of me, of my accomplishments. I'm really political, and so is my father. He loved my politics, and I get my politics from my father. Mm-hmm. And he was very involved. And I admire both my parents. In many ways, they always voted, always, and we always vote. It's through their example. My grandparents always voted. I came from a family that took its civic responsibility seriously, and that if we were citizens and had the right to vote, then we also had the duty to vote. And so I have always had that in me because of my parents, and I think that that's the other thing about, for me, being a man. It means to be an engaged citizen. Mm-hmm. That part of being just a human being, man or woman, is that if you are given rights, then you have responsibilities. Mm-hmm. That means you've been given something. So what are you going to do? Just say, I don't consider a man to be a responsible man if that man doesn't vote. I don't consider a woman, I don't to take her humanity, sacred if she doesn't vote. We have a right to fight for it. And we have to remember that, who elects everybody that holds office? People who don't vote.
Yeah.
And their excuse is, well, the system doesn't work. Well, that's why it doesn't work. Democracy is based on voting. That's it. Mm-hmm. You don't vote, then... you want to say, just shut up. But, you don't want to say that because then you're rude and mean and you're not being kind. But, it's like, what does it mean? And again, what does it mean to be a man? And in all of those stories, I think particularly in Sometimes the Rain, mm-hmm. That their fathers, they were the victims of a masculinity that destroys human beings and destroying the world. And I believe that kind of masculinity still is destroying the world. And our president is a prime example. It is the worst attributes of masculinity that's conceivable to be in one person, because it is an absolute, a man who rules absolutely. He's a complete misogynist. Women are not to be loved or to be screwed. he just has no respect for women at all. He's threatened by them. He's threatened by his masculinity is so fragile that he has to be admired by everyone. You see, that's really sad. To be that kind of man. I don't do what I do to be admired. I do what I do because I have to do this. I have to write. I have to paint. I'm an artist. Nobody has to pat me on the back and tell me how great a writer I am. This is not what this is not when I do what I do. I'm a guy that's doing what he's supposed to do in this world. And I always used to tell my student, look, they'd ask me, is this extra credit? I'd say, you don't get extra credit for doing what you're supposed to do in this life. And you don't. And now the world is so horrible that when someone's good, we're going, God, what a good guy. Well, hello. No, he's just being a human being like he's supposed to be. And now you're supposed to be praised for that? And that's ridiculous. We don't praise women for that. We don't. And I know that in my next collection of stories, there wasn't a big presence of women in those stories. But I am writing about women. And I'm writing about women in stories, and they're not all good. I mean, I'm tempted to reproduce my mother in every story, but not everyone's like my mother. Not everyone is like her. And so I wanted, I've known women, and in my other books, I do have women that are, in one story, in my novel, Imperfect Light, there's a therapist, Graciela, who is a therapist, and she does not get along with her son at all. And when you read the novel, you realize that the reason she doesn't get along with her son is that she's grieving her husband's death and hasn't gotten over it. She's become, apart from the fact that she's a therapist and helps a lot of people, she's merely in her life has become a widow, just, someone who lost her husband. And her son, who is just like her husband, brings back so much pain because he's affectionate and kind and all those things that her husband was. And she's not a bad person at all. She's just not an affectionate person, She takes care of business. That's why she's a good therapist. She cares for them in ways that they're supposed to be cared for. And she has to learn how to be affectionate and kind to herself. Not so tough. And in Aristotle and Dante, there's, Dante's mother is a therapist. And she is always, her husband's not tough, and she's not going to ever, call Dante to task when he screws up, but she is. She's always after him. And he needs to be, because he charms everybody. Everybody loves him. And she said, oh, you come here, sit down, and he needs that. And that's love. And of course, Aristotle is like my mother. And, she's very affectionate, and she talks to you, and she's kind, and she does churchy things like working at food back like my mom, and all of those things. But she also has not perfect. She erases the memory of a son who's in prison, and why he's there, because she can't handle it. She can't handle that. And so I like to be a woman and to be a man, and, those things matter. And in my books, I want them to matter. I want my, let's face it, in every book there is a politics to representation. What is the politics behind that? I don't have to, it doesn't seem like politics in my book because I have a gift for writing real people. My editor tells me, you don't write caricatures, you write real people. And that is the gift I have. I don't know where that comes from, but it comes naturally. And so I make them sound like they are real people. They're real people to me. I'm a mess when I finish a book. I'm a disaster because I feel everything in there. And I always tell my students, well, I don't know if everybody's like that, but I'm just like, I'm a mess. I finish this. God, I sit down, I need a glass of wine. It's like, I need a cigarette. It's like, I just pour myself into it. I'm just like that. When I go to the movies, I'm like that too. I'm like, oh, God. And my friends always say, they grab my arm and say, Ben, it's only a movie. But I'm so interactive, like that. I'm so in it. And I'm like that, if I'm in, I'm in. That's it. And so, yeah, and I pay the price for it too. But that's how I am with my writing. And so it's going to feel like it matters. And I do tell my students, when you're writing something, if it doesn't hurt, it's not going to matter. And so I do write like that with the kind of intensity, but also kind of with the kind of, I have a real respect for language. And I think that comes from growing up with two languages that were at war with each other in my head. And I'd hear a word in Spanish, and I would translate it to English, or the other way around. And sometimes I didn't have a translation, like desvelado. We don't have a word for that in English. Yeah. Isn't that weird? And then there's other things like that, and and other things like say, like we say the word break. That sounds like break, but in Spanish the word is quebrado, and it doesn't sound like what it is. But that doesn't mean it's a different thing. And so I was always comparing the two languages, and I always hate bilingual versions of books. I have a bilingual, version of Pablo Neruda's poems. And so I read the poem, and I can't help it. I look at the English translation, and I go, no. So, and I'm thinking, relax, man, just relax, just read, But I can't do that. I'm always like wondering and doing that. And I think I go through all that when I wrote these stories. I think the most difficult story to write for me was the last story.
Hurting Game?
The Hurting Game, because it had to be like a sort of happy ending, and I'm not used to that. I have such a tragic vision of life, and I'm not like that, but it comes out. It's like I wrote in a poem once. It's called "Arriving at the Heart of Tragedy," and I put in there, see, the Mexicans and the English both love tragedy. The difference is that the English leave it at the theater, and Mexicans bring it home every night. And it's like, but I think that Mexicans have a sense of tragedy, but they kind of live in an optimism that's incredible. We are not an unhappy people for all of that. And in America, we have a comic vision of life, which is to say it's regenerative, it's optimistic, and all of that. But for all of that optimism, we are not particularly a happy people, which is interesting. We always believe in maybe it's because we're not true to our own mythology. We're not true to, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator. Life, liberty, and the pursuit. Those are beautiful words. I mean, I know those very entitled white men that wrote them, but it doesn't matter because their words transcend them. And that's the beauty about words. It's still there as a document. They're dead, and whatever they did doesn't matter because those words are left for us. Yeah. That's what's left. And so there's plenty to criticize about our founding fathers, but they shine by leaps and bounds through the current Republican administration and the Republican Party. Yeah. They were enlightened men. They were intellectuals. If they were religious, it was a religion that was more like, and they didn't want this country to be founded on religion. It's not a theocracy. And people who said this nation was founded by as a Christian nation, no, it wasn't. It may be founded by Christians, but it was not, or Christians by tradition, if not by faith. But it was not founded as a Christian nation. That's just a lie. And the problem we find ourselves in today is that, hey, we don't believe in the separation between church and state. We simply don't, which is really, we don't believe in science either. But I think that my books, no, I consider myself an intellectual. And that's not a good thing because we live in a profoundly anti-intellectual country. Well, you might as well be a fag, and say you're an intellectual. You can't claim that because you're made fun of, as if there's something wrong with using your mind. As if, what is wrong with using your mind? God gave me a good mind, and He gave me a good heart too, and so I try to put the two together. But my stories, especially the Kentucky Club, especially in this collection, they're so emotional. When I read the final version, just because I was going over it, I came to the end of it. I said, Ben, you're kind of screwed up, you know that? People are not going to think you're a happy person. And, I'm a happy person. And then I am now. I mean, I didn't used to be a happy person, but I think I am now. And, probably because, I always like to say, the only problem with being gay is you have to date men. Yep, that is the problem. And so, I like not dating men. I like not dating. I'm pretty, I like being alone. The things I love to do in my life, the things I have always really loved to do. I love to read. I ran for a long time as a jogger. Jogging. I didn't go with other people. I went by myself. Writing and painting. These are not group activities. They're not. But so I'm very comfortable with being by myself. And sometimes people call me. Well, you're not answering your phone. I don't have my phone with me when I'm working. Because I'm working. Yeah. And a lot of people think, well, they think you're retired from teaching. Well, just because, you don't think that writing a novel is work. It's like, well, it's a lot of work. And so is painting. And so I'm not available. And who is available when they're working? Yeah. Most people aren't. But they think because I do it at home. Or they laugh. I used to have a friend of mine. Jaime Esparza is a good friend of mine. And he was calling me in the summer and went to have lunch. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm reading a poem. He said, it must be nice. And he kind of said, yep, it is nice. I chose to be a professor, which means I get summers off. And I get to read poems. You chose to be the DA. You have to work. And hey, you want to trade salaries? That we laugh. But it was just a joke but I don't think I was serious about that because he actually reads all my books and he really respects me. But I think there was a joke. I remember when I was married and I used to go to all these functions of lawyers and all this stuff. And he would ask me what I did. And I didn't tell him I was a professor. I would tell him, I'm a poet. And one guy says to me, "Oh, in other words, your wife supports you for a living." And I said, "That's an interesting thing to say." But because there's a lot of people that don't respect that because especially if you say a poet, they also hear intellectual. But if I hadn't been a poet, I could have never written the Kentucky Club. Because it taught me about language and about being careful with words and being precise, and our experience of reading are only the words that the writer puts down. It's through the words that they experience the story. And so I'm always very careful. There's not anything in my stories that I'm not aware of. Because sometimes I'm not, and I look at it and say, oh, look at this. And I say, oh, is that true? Or is that not true? And if it's not true, even if it sounds pretty, I take it out. If it's not true for me. Just because it sounds nice doesn't mean that you think, a lot of things that sound nice. And you think well, what the hell does that mean? Sometimes. When I used to teach, young poets think that beginning poets think that if it doesn't really make a lot of sense, that's what a poem is, because it's a puzzle you have to figure out. Well, that's not what a poem is. And so, I always have the smartest guy, usually a guy, will bring in this poem and has got all these really interesting things in it. And then people say, oh, this was so great. They give feedback. And then finally I stop and I say, can anybody tell me what this poem is about? It was real quiet. I said, well, I can't. And I've been reading poems for a long time, because just because it sounds good and interesting and profound and deep doesn't mean that it means anything. And so for me, it's like you have to communicate to an audience. You have to. And if my stories and my books don't communicate to an audience beyond, just because my stories are set on the border and they're about Latinos doesn't mean that they don't speak to anybody in the world. Aristotle and Dante has now been published in 29 languages.
Oh, wow.
The most recent languages are Russian and Catalan. And so, these characters travel the world and speak to young people the world over. And they're Latinos. And they're in El Paso, 1987. Dude, that's rock. No, it's because they told us that wasn't possible. That only white people are representative of human beings. Only they can be universal. Well, I wrote a book that became universal. And because we can, if audiences are open, we can be stand-ins for them who are of a different culture. Yeah. And interestingly enough, even though I wrote for children and young people because I wanted Latino boys to read. Well, I don't think I've succeeded in that. I don't think I've increased my Latino readers and boys. But and that's kind of disappointing. But I don't know. But when I was in Paris to read at a bookstore, there was 250 young people came to my reading. Only about 10 of them were boys, and they were all girls. You can't tell. You can't pick your audience. Your audience picks you.
Yeah.
But I also think it's interesting. I think the people in the Latino world who really champion my work are women, Latino women in academia. They have championed my work, and gay men. I'm not saying that straight people haven't, but they were the people that really championed my work from the very beginning. And I think the women championed my work because I didn't write like a macho shit. That's why, And so I'm very grateful for that. And I, looking back at the Kentucky Club, I wish I'd written more stories about women, but I wasn't at that point. Not that the women there, when they are present, appear to be bad people. They're very good people. But I think I'm so grateful for the struggles of women, and I've grown more and more aware of it, because I think that we don't treat women as equals. We don't really. I mean, we know that society doesn't treat women as equals, and we know that they have to put up with more crap than we do. But what are we doing as men to join their struggles? I think of the AIDS crisis and how that really was. I mean, Stonewall was the beginning of gay rights, but it was really the AIDS crisis that brought everything forward. And who was there from the very beginning to fight like the devil for the men that were suffering from AIDS? The lesbian community. That's who. Yeah. And I'm not sure that the gay male community has ever properly thanked them for lending us their strong and resilient and indomitable voices, And I don't think we should forget that, and I don't think that we should forget that women are still struggling, especially in the age of Trump, and that with the rise of a Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. Well, they are supremely anti-women, and we need to stand up and say, I don't want to colonize a woman's experience because I'm not a woman, and I would never do that. But there is nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I will call myself a feminist because I know the day of equality has not arrived. And even though I'm a man, I'm not saying I'm a woman. What I am saying is I recognize the fact that you are not treated equally. And I think that's a human right that I need to join and I need to voice. And I think that's, really important.
Yeah.
I also don't think that, for me, I don't think you can be a good writer if you're not a good person. I don't. I really don't. And maybe I can be proven wrong. I mean, maybe like Ernest Hemingway was he a shit? Well, I don't think he really was. He had a lot of flaws, and he died in pain and committed suicide. Yeah. In his struggles. So I think that one of the things that makes me be a good person is living on the border, because I'm surrounded by really good people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's great to have someone great like you here, and I know, Vanessa, you have to leave in a little bit to work, but did you want to ask him something about the language? Did you have a question for him regarding that?
I did, but I don't remember what it was. I think
the use of italics and
yeah, I really found your use of italics interesting.
Oh, when it was in Spanish?
Not only that, because there was some words that were Spanish that were italicized, but then there was some words in Spanish that weren't italicized, and I found that was interesting.
Oh, I know. You know why? It's my inconsistency. Because
okay, I was like, is there a purpose for that?
In English, when you use a foreign word, it should be italicized. Mm-hmm. But I get that, the rules. Mm-hmm. But I resist it, too, because Spanish is not a foreign language for me.
No, yeah.
Maybe for the reader. But so I think that kind of struggle, it shows in the book.
No, yeah. And I've heard a lot of writers recently that are fighting against that. Like, we're going to do Patron Saints of Nothing by Randy Rebay next month. And he said that in his book, he does italicize it's Filipino that he writes in. So he italicizes those words the first time they appear in the book, but then the second time and the third time he stops doing it because they're no longer foreign to the main character.
Right. And I think that it's who society gives permission to do that. Mm-hmm. Cormac McCarthy, when he used to use Spanish in his books, whenever italicized. But certainly he was never criticized that because he's not Mexican. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that critique is reserved for certain people and not for others.
And he doesn't use quotation marks either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really think that we should look at we are the recipients of the culture around us. That's why we're all a little bit racist, because we live in a racist culture. Everybody who says, I'm free of racist discourse is lying to himself. But we have to resist it. Mm-hmm. We have to know it's there before we resist it. We have to know which part of us is thinking, oh my God, did I just say that? Oh, you know what? I better think about what's going through me. Mm-hmm. And so we do receive, the things we learn, and we have to. There's so much internalized racism there's a lot of internalized racism among Mexican Americans. There is. Yeah. And, one time I was at a gay bar, and this guy was sitting next to me. And, he was really good looking. He was a Latino, really. He was in his 40s, and really good looking. And then we're talking about nothing, and we're just talking. And then this, the bartender knew they had shifts. The bartender came in, and so I spoke Spanish to him. Because, he says, oh, you speak Spanish? I said, yeah. He says, well, you don't really look Mexican. I don't know exactly what to say to that, but he says, you're lucky because you can pass. Because he was very dark and all that. Mm. And I said, oh, yeah. And he went on a diatribe against Mexicans about how horrible culture and all. He went on and on and on. Mm. And I said, well, I'm not going to sit here and enlighten you about this because clearly you've made up your mind. And he says, oh, you're one of those. You probably voted for that Obama. And I was horrified. I just said, I'm going to move over there because you are scaring me. But that kind of self-hatred, it comes from somewhere. You internalize it, and then you see yourself through somebody else's eyes. Well, that is an affliction that, to one degree or another, has afflicted our community. And when we're free of that, we can see ourselves through our own eyes. And I think that's important. And that's done through language. When we're ashamed of speaking Spanish, when we're or when we refuse to speak English, all of those things. Or we're insulted when we live in a community. Some people are insulted because they walk into Dillard's, and they say, and the lady asked me, "En qué lo puedo servir?" in Spanish, and they're all offended. I said, "Why are you offended? They have to talk to you in some language, and you do know Spanish, so what's the big deal?" But they're offended. Like if you're going to get offended by all of that, we live on the border, and like that's crazy. I speak to people in the language that they speak to me in here on the border. They speak to me in Spanish. I speak to them in Spanish.
Right.
They speak to me in English. I speak to them in English. But those kinds of things, also, it's kind of wonderful that knowing two languages, it affects your English in some ways. And for me, it's affected my English in this sense. I pay more attention to it, so that I know that English is naturally iambic. It is. And I listen to the rhythms of that. So a word like, "Today I woke and then I walked the dog," is an iambic pentameter line. It's natural English. Listen to the rhythms. And so it's taught me to listen to the rhythms of language. And so it's made me a better writer.
It's what fascinates, I think, all of us about the way you're able to say so much with so much precision, as you mentioned. So how is it that you were approached to, about the screenplay and having something be filmed for
Well, Aristotle and Dante is a kind of book that has gained in popularity as the years go by. My royalties get bigger and bigger as the time goes by because more people will read it, which is really kind of interesting. It's like this is a kind of book that has sold so many copies internationally and everywhere. And I didn't expect that. And so with this popularity comes attention to the book. Let's see. Because the decade is ending, there's books of the decade. And I think Aristotle and Dante is named on 5 or 6 of those list as books of the decade, which is like, wow, it's really kind of nice. And all kinds of readers read it. Adults, teachers, students, all kinds.
Other writers too. I saw Elizabeth Acevedo pick yours out in particular.
Yeah. And I think a lot of writers really love that book. And I have a friend of mine who's this. My goal is to be a young adult writer. And I said, "What's your goal?" To write a book, but in Aristotle and Dante. And I said, "Don't compete. It's not right, right? But I think, when I wrote that book, I just wrote a book. Like that's what I do.
Yeah.
But people responded to it in ways that they haven't responded to my other work. But I think, why? Because it's such a tender book. You almost have to be mean to hate that book. You really have to be really mean.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a beautiful love story. And I think, we were talking about this collection as well and the LGBT characters in it. And, as a straight man, I can relate to, what a lot of these characters go through. And we were talking last time, this is the first collection we read that in school that has LGBT characters, right? And it speaks to the white canon that we have in academia. And, so I think that there's part of that too, that you're just able to make these experiences so universal, and it speaks to everyone, regardless of their background. You mentioned so many languages it's been translated to as well.
I think part of that too is that the parents were such an essential part of the novel, and I think it appeals to people. To a lot of Latinos, we have families. We come from families. And where do you think gay people come from? People say, we're, all the conservative people. Well, we believe in family. Well, so do I. What the hell are you talking about? And then say, they want to keep children away from gay people because then they're going to make them into gay people. I said, it doesn't work that way. I grew up in a straight family, and I was taught to just be straight, and it didn't take, because that's not how it works. Yeah. It's not a choice. What is a choice? It's how you respond to it. Mm-hmm. You can respond with acceptance, or you can respond with hate. But hate is a decision. And if you decided to hate people who are different, then it's on you, and own it. And don't throw God under the bus, because it's not about God. Mm-hmm. It's about you. And your smallness, and your meanness, and your refusal to treat other human beings as human beings. Yeah. And I think that's one of the great things about writing, is that I write so that to remind people of their own humanity, and to remind myself of my own. Mm-hmm.
We're definitely reminded of that, and I myself just can't wait to see a story of yours on the big screen. I'm a big film buff as well. I studied screenwriting, and it's one thing to have something in print, as I'm sure you know, and just have to translate it to a different medium. How is it? Have you been involved in that process? You're kind of hands off?
No, I'm not hands off, but we're in the works of making a deal, and we have a screenplay by Henry Alberto, who's an up-and-coming screenwriter himself, and it's a wonderful screenplay, wonderful, and he's young. He's 35. That's young. I'm 65, so yeah, that's right. That's young, and he's a really wonderful guy, and we have our executive producer, Lin-Manuel Miranda, which is wonderful, and we have a team that we're putting forth, and I'm sure at the beginning of the year we're going to have a deal. And then we're going to start filming the movie, which is it's really exciting, and I want to be a part of it. They're going to come here to film. Unfortunately, Texas does not have they don't offer film people any incentives. Mm-hmm. So we're going to film in New Mexico, because they do give incentives. Mm-hmm. But all of our establishing shots will be in El Paso.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Yeah.
So, but it really is too bad, because I wanted all of it to be filmed in El Paso. Come on. Well, let's film it here. Yeah. But as an independent film, it's not a huge budget. It's not incredibly small, but it's not this big budget. So they need those breaks, and we don't get them here. Texas doesn't do that. Yeah. I don't know why we don't do that. I think that's stupid and small-minded. But I don't think that Texas legislature cares with Hollywood types. I think that's the problem. Yeah. Which is silly.
Yeah, I mean, I heard, Netflix moved their main office to Albuquerque now because of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, our loss here in Texas. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll definitely, We've taught your work before in our classes, and that's we like that about your work. It's so accessible. Like
the students respond well.
Oh yeah,
right away. Being able to recognize the names of places and visualize it, and
that's cool. That's cool for them, huh?
Yeah. It's not like the canon where you get this Westminster Abbey. That I've never been there. I don't think I ever will, and. These are often that you mentioned authenticity, right? And I think it doesn't have to be this highbrow, palace, right? To be something that is worth writing about and learning from. And I think that's I really like that about your writing. The Kentucky Club, there's something grand about it, but yet there's something human about it, that anyone can be anyone there, and it seems. That's part of the collection too.
I like to think that it was my language that was really my love of language and my care of constructing sentences. But because that's what makes my working class characters grand. Because if anything, I am absolutely true to my class. I grew up poor and working class, and it is not something that I will ever abandon. No matter how educated I have, no matter how successful I am, that's my class. And that's just the way it is for me. Mm-hmm. I think, Sophia Loren once, I was in an interview, I forget where, but she was saying the same thing. She grew up poor, and in her heart she remains that way, which I think gives her a kind of a special elegance, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. She's not pretentious at all, and it's because she knows who she is and where she comes from, and she would never abandon that. And that, it's funny that's why I still call myself a Catholic. I can't bring myself to abandon my mother's God. I just can't. It's a kind of loyalty you have to yourself. And I think, when I think about the people that are involved in making Aristotle and Dante, their love for the book and what it says and who it speaks to is great. And that's the kind of movie we want to make, and we're not going to abandon that, or we're not going to make it at all.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how it is with me. And we should all know who we are. Maybe that is what we're supposed to do in life, is simply discover who you are and why you're here. I know that I was meant to be a writer and an artist because I was given that gift. And I hope I never betray that gift. Ever. Because that's my life. It's not something I do, it's who I am. Yeah. And I think that is, so I can, if I die today, I'm good with that. We're greedy. We'd always want another day. But you know what? I've done my work. I will do more work, but I have done my work. I remain true to what I needed to do. And I'm proud of the books I've written. I'm very proud because like work. I was raised to work. My parents worked, and we were raised to work, and this is my work. And I'm proud to be the son of workers, and I'm proud to be the son of a people who have made this country great. Mm-hmm. They have, in so many ways, and it's not acknowledged, and maybe it's not acknowledged, and so. But that ingratitude is not enough for us to abandon our gratitude. Because I live the Mexican American people are a grateful people. And they are a humble people. And they are a decent people. And I am so happy to be a part of that. Because I think, Trump hates us, but it is we who have helped America great, not him.
Yeah.
And and we know this. We don't have to convince anybody of that anymore. We don't have to convince anybody of anything, of the things we have done and accomplished. That's one thing as a human being. If someone puts me on trial, I've already been found guilty. I'm moving on. I am. I'm not here to convince people to love me, admire me, look at me, any of those things. I am grateful, though, for the audience that I have. I think I have very incredibly generous readers, and I'm so proud to have them, because a writer is nothing without readers. Nothing. Readers have made my career. It's a lie to say that that I've made my career. My readers have made my career. Just because I wrote a book doesn't mean that I'm entitled to be read. And I'd like to think that I earned my readers at least.
Oh yeah, I mean, and its readers would determine, what gets taught. We as professors at EPCC. But we want to thank you, Ben, for sharing a little bit of your time, of your work, of your philosophy. It's a lot of what you say. I'm just nodding my head. The listeners can't see, because it just speaks true to what we all believe here. And especially during this time.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Right on. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us in our discussion on Everything Begins and Ends at the Kentucky Club by Ben Sáenz. Join us on our next episode as we conclude our discussion as well. And if you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Follow us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep.